find docs unless they're just linked somewhere else. I cannot find them through Drive.
It is very annoying, actually, but that works. All right. So like I didn't look at the meeting. Obviously, you guys had a meeting last week. Are there any highlights I should know about? Sounds like some again.
I feel like the two highlights were speed up stuff. Like I feel like the testing stuff was going good. We gave some feedback to Michelle. Or at least like the stuff that I don't feel really ever got resolved was the speed up stuff. And there was also a security bug, but that's tackled now. So
yeah.
That was an upstream fix, right? So I could upgrade my servers, and because you had highlighted it was also present and up to code.
Yes, yeah, it's upstream. Right, it was upstream. Jonathan patched it. It's like 90 to 1.2.90 or something, I think.
Yep.
And it's on all of Suffix servers now.
Okay.
Like we updated production to that as well, since David sort of thought that most like the interviews that we are using it on are interviews that we want people to be able to upload docx's in. So yeah.
Okay.
But sorry.
And it was
Michelle,
only when you inserted a docx into another docx that was the issue?
I'm pretty sure. At least
When
that was how I was able to reproduce it.
That's at least the fix that I saw. Okay.
Sorry, what's up, Michelle?
I think it was when I thought the security bug was when you uploaded an image, but it was actually a docx.
Well, no, because I think it was
just whenever you
that was
docx.
So that was the specific spots in our interviews where like we expected it to be an image and we just sort of include that image into another docx. But I guess
got it.
I don't know if there are actual places you can insert docx's into another docx. It wasn't actually ever displaying in the final output, like it wasn't like nesting them at all, but it was executing the Jinja templates in the uploaded one.
Interesting.
Which was the issue. Was just that it's executing those Jinja templates, and you can get around the fact that it doesn't, like, it's not like showing you that information in the downloaded one, because you can always just print it to the log or the console log that you can see. So
cool.
Okay.
And the speed ups, I think one thing we established was that we need to watch out for specific situations and like profile those specific situations. And Bryce made a toolbox item that lets you use a profiler to at least to generate a profile file.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. And then Michelle, you this weekend added a package scope boundary item. I'm gonna push it to the end if there are other items people had. Anything else people wanted to talk about?
Tests, like our tests for our assembly line, various things, and like, I don't know whether there's actual buy-in to that, because there's, I think, a few things, well, at least one thing that could have been caught by tests if we were keeping them up to date recently, which is the HTML download tables. Like that would have caused an error on a test. We would have known it was broken.
Okay, so we're just in like the agenda setting part now. Any other items people wanted to add to the agenda?
I have I suppose a Weaver. I played with adding a footer and also played with the color scheme for the interview. So I just wanted to show you guys what I had and see what you figure out.
Okay, so that'll be a demo.
Yeah, also I have another item, but maybe not today. Maybe not a high. If we have enough time.
This is our chance to set our agenda, and we don't have to discuss everything every time, but we can add it.
Okay, yeah, it's the documentation website where I'm thinking like maybe we can add a page for the architecture where I updated the graphs that we had before about how the components work together and the folder and all those things. So
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
yeah, and also I have some questions about the order and of those web pages, and maybe some of the pages can be broken down into sub pages because they are just too long on one page. But
Mm.
that's why I'm thinking that this, I don't know if we can get to it because probably will take maybe time.
Yeah, let me see. Do I have it? And my perennial thing is like, how do people even find it? It's not that easy to find. There's a link here now, which is good. Oh, there actually is related to that. So I was trying out different formats for getting the syntax highlighting in the PyDoc stuff. And I did not have success. I don't know if anyone wants to try to. Not very clear in the documentation there, like exactly. I thought I was following what it said. It just said to use, anyway, any kind of RST style indentation, but then doesn't render the right way. So we'll have to think about what that right syntax is and get that in there in our PyDoc documentation. So then we can start having better API docs. So these are out of date still, but.
And are there other items that we just haven't carried forward from other weeks? I don't think we carried forward any items from previous weeks in like, I think last week we didn't put those there. I'm not sure.
We resolved these from last week. The one thing we haven't, we keep saying you want to talk about, but we haven't, is the abstraction stuff. I feel like we could defer that. The
Today's not the day.
only thing I can say we might want to try doing again is starting to look at our backlog of issues. We've been adding issues, so just make sure there's nothing there that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, like if we want to, when do we I know we mentioned at some point doing another sprint at the end of the summer. It's getting to that point.
It is almost December, you're right. Yes, especially since, we have August, let me see, first day of classes, I think, is August 23rd.
Oh, really?
Maybe it's the 30th.
Maybe I thought it was. Okay.
I think it's the 30th, actually.
Holy moly.
Because I know I'd scheduled a vacation there without thinking about it. But someone would just call it that first day. Yeah, it must be the 30th. I wouldn't have done it on the 20th. It would have been 2 classes on the 23rd, I think. So that makes me think we probably want to do a triage meeting August 2nd and then do a 2-week sprint with room to go to 3 weeks. I mean, sprints are kind of a little arbitrary. 3 weeks maybe is better. I don't know. What do people think? Starting out with 3 weeks, so we're not. Either way, I think we should do a triage on August 2nd, probably.
Mm-hmm. I feel like practically our sprints have been 3 weeks. We've done 2 weeks of stuff, and then we have a wrap-up week essentially. And I feel like that works well for the 4 of us and just our pace. Personally, I don't know if I'll actually be able to actually take on sprint things because it's getting precariously close to
also the end of our Tyler stuff, right?
Tyler stuff.
Exactly. So, yep, that was my thought as well.
But yeah. So my thoughts probably aren't the most relevant. But.
No, it is. And I mean, one of the things we have to think about is there a different way for us to get help with doing code reviews? Because I think that's our main bottleneck for sprints. And you've taken on a lot of that, Bryce. But if you're not going to be available, I wonder if we should think about how that impacts the sprint. So I'm just going to put on the agenda thinking about sprints. So So one thing that we could, I mean, we've been working on issues as we go, which is great. I think a sprint's still been a really helpful focusing mechanism for us. And I see. So therefore, I think we should still do it, but maybe that should affect what items we put in our sprint too. If again, Bright's not being available for either code reviews or for doing most of the coding. Is there anything like thinking now? Like I think we should all be thinking about the next 2 weeks. What are we at? Yeah, we have 2 full weeks before the second. We should start marking issues that we think should be part of the next milestone. Everyone should take some time to review the next milestone as is and think about issues they've created and where they fit. But is there a particular focus that we think that this sprint should have? That's something that might help guide people's adding and triaging issues in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I guess always the first item should be the ones at the box. I don't understand.
Are there any particular
should we make this item the first one and then just start discussing it, or are we still making the list of agenda items?
I want to just spend enough time to think to get people's input on that. So it's a great thought. I don't think where it is on this list really matters. So I think we might just have actually finished talking about it if we hadn't done the process discussion now. That's okay. If no one has other thoughts on priority, that's fine. But if people do have some, just wanted to start thinking about it and write down what people have now. And if no one has thoughts, we can come back to it over the next 2 weeks and people can just think about it.
I was gonna say, I don't have any thoughts. Michelle, I'd be interested in your thoughts because I know you've been working a lot more closely with all of the current cohort of students than at least I have for sure. And I feel like that's what their experiences have been with just doc assemble versus assembly line stuff. And if there's anything that you think that focusing on would like make their experience a lot better.
I mean, possibly documentation. It depends how good the individual is at actually looking at documentation. But there's stuff that they won't find in doc assemble documentation either, just because it's not set up that way. But there's definitely stuff that is specific to our documents that to our code that they won't find in doc assemble documentation. But like other than that, it's just been individual issues that have come up with a bug here or there. So it's nothing like the Weaver or that kind of usability.
Okay.
Here's a usability question. Like how much have people been having to pull in questions and customize them? That's a pain point I kept thinking we could make better for students, but we've never prioritized it. Is that something that you've found people have struggled with?
First of all, they struggle with understanding that if they want to change how something's operating, they can just, it's words, they can just pull, copy and paste. But secondly, I have trouble telling if they are changing things because it is necessary for them to change, or if they're changing things because they want to try and tweak it, but don't understand the process of developing assembly line. I don't think I've seen any commonalities between what questions they have customized, though. Like not major commonalities. There hasn't been one thing that they've been glaringly all been customizing. I think they've been using the fields well. So name fields and address fields and stuff like that, and then changing the words in the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. Like that's kind of what our vision was. We made those functions, those methods rather.
Exactly.
But people have been able to follow that process of like, I click copy, I click the source button, I copy the text in and I change what I want to change. That's something people have been able to learn that process.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I thought of some ways to make it simpler, basically, for people to do that. And in the Weaver itself.
Also knowing what questions there are available. like what our questions at assembly line already has taken care of is something that is an issue. I mean, if there is something that will ease it, it really, I think they just it needs to be like, if it can be more discoverable, that they can copy things and put them into their own code somehow, then, because they just don't think of it. And yeah.
Yeah, I think right now there is a page on how to customize your interview.
I
We
was
can
thinking,
definitely expand that, add more details based on Michelle's experience with the students. So we give them more specifics and give some examples and say, okay, in this case, so what you do in that case, what you
Maybe if there were like, is there a question that is just always customized, and instead of customizing it in the Weaver, you give them instructions to customize it afterwards by copying and pasting code?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by it's always customized.
So like the intro page is always customized. So say we had a default intro page, right? Their specific interview intro page is always customized. So say we had a default intro page. I don't know if that's the best example, but and then we were like, your next step is going to be to customize the intro page. Now, and then we give them instructions for copy pasting the code and making their own code. So they at least have to go through that step as part of the Weaver process.
so I find like forcing people to do something that artificially isn't always like as good of a learning tool. People think it's better to make them not have to do it if we can. But so the intro screen we create for them and they customize it, but there's no copying involved right now. But I realized that was just like the example you're trying to come up with on the fly. What I was thinking of is like having an option, and I think we already have an issue for it, that let people say, okay, generate all of, don't have use anything from the question library, copy in all of the questions instead, so I can customize them one by one. That was my thinking, at least for the ones that use like name fields and address fields. People could always customize the above the sub question and question part.
I don't think it's a problem once people understand what to do. They just never they don't discover what to do.
Yeah,
like, I don't think the problem is
discovery
that they
on that
need
idea.
that everybody needs to like negate the progress we've made in wording various things, right? Like I think the problem is that they just don't discover the process. Sorry, Bryce, I interrupted, I think.
Oh, no. It's the same sentiment that I don't think, it's definitely an issue of discovery as opposed to and once people discover it, it's pretty straightforward. I don't think we have a lot of issues from there. And I also don't know if I quite agree with bringing all of the questions in at the beginning. Because I guess that would like Michelle said, it makes it a bit easier to change it, but I have a feeling you're going to get a lot more people changing things that they don't really need to. They'll just because it's there, they're more likely to, and we end up with splits from the actual question library on smaller things or translation, already translated strings and stuff like that.
Well, this is an idea I just wrote down here, which I should make an issue. So what about something that highlights it when people are running the interview from the playground, and then they can see in context documentation? I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but just an idea that popped in my head. Maybe we should make an issue for that, discoverability of that feature. And it sounds like it doesn't really belong in the Weaver because we don't think we should change. I don't know.
Yeah, no, what if we do want to maybe consider this, the one thing I'm thinking about is the not Weaver interview, but Weaver adjustable interview, sort of you upload something that the Weaver has already spit out. Maybe you've changed a few questions and we have some high level, allow you to do some of the same changes you would do in the Weaver to an already existing interview. That would be a thing you could do of once you've already made an interview and you upload it to the second thing of hey, did you want to do you want to reword like this one question as opposed to like all of them just in the interview at once.
I think so. I hear that as a tool, as an alternative to the copying and pasting, but it doesn't seem to me that it would improve people's discovery of copying and pasting, just delay their discovery of doing that, which seems like a more translatable skill, you know?
Yeah, I guess in general, the whole Weaver, that, or at least that whole idea is a bit like if you're having trouble with all of the sort of technicality of DocAssemble and YAML and everything else, like here's something that will make it easier, which you're right, like it does makes it easier, but it also makes them not understand a bit about what's going on under the hood of DocAssemble, which
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
guess is
always
just
have
a hard
people.
thing to get through in general.
We do have people start with the hello world, so they have that context, but there's a big leap from that to like what the Weaver generates for sure.
Oh,
So it's like, which that's
I
feedback I
have a
got.
question. When
Yeah.
you do boot camps, do you actually have a session that goes through this, how to customize the Weaver generated interview specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did it on the fly, and I think the example we used during the boot camp was like a little bit too hard for some people to follow. It's like adding some show lists and stuff. But yes, we do. So yeah, people have documentation about it. They have the page, they have the boot camp video. Although it might be
If
complicated.
you have a really like a hands-on detailed session that really puts a lot of emphasis, so people actually try it on, so that makes more impression in their memory. So when later on they can remember, oh, I did that one, so now I can apply that one. I think that's more like when Michelle was saying, it's because people don't know that process, or they don't remember or whatever. Once they understand the process, then it doesn't have to be so detailed. Okay, this screen, that screen need to be modified. They can use their own judgment and see which ones should be.
Yeah, so like the overall picture I'm getting about this pain point is, yeah, it is something that people need to learn. Once people know what to do, they can do it. And we could add more ways for people to learn about the process and know that it exists. And it sounds like maybe actually the process of doing it isn't too bad for people. Is that right,
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah.
It's just like knowing that it exists. So
Yeah.
and maybe like learning how to do it one time. So maybe adding a video that helps people, that shows how it's done, is a great idea. So I'm thinking maybe that's a Teaching Tuesday kind of thing we could do. Maybe it's a little late in the summer if all the students have had to do it already. But
yeah, I think the recording is a good idea, and then post the link on the documentation website, and then we can always point them to that one, and they can watch it over.
Okay. All right. So this was all just by way of talking about. So it sounds like for the sprint, that part that we would work on here is really just documentation. That there's not going to be new code features added for that. I would say like another big thing for me is performance. Obviously, that's come up a bunch. I also think a big common pain point that would be great to focus on by the end of the summer, doesn't have to be in the sprint, is, I made an issue for this, the copy your answers interface. So I'm just going to link that here. So this kind of ties into testing as far as manual testing goes. I just feel like this comes up so much. Someone makes a change on a longer interview. They want to be able to load in. They want to jump to the end and see if it broke their output. So I want to prioritize that feature kind of thing where I think they call this fast forward on Community Lawyer or After Pattern. So very simple use case. There's parts that kind of spiral out of it. This is the big one. We don't have to make it that easy to do. you know, it doesn't have to be that complete a feature as long as it works and there's not too many clicks involved. Developers are going to use that, I think, a lot. So I'm going to try to, I think that's something. Are there other features people think are worth highlighting? As this is a pain point, we should think about maybe there's like 3 or 4 or 5 different issues that relate to it. Performance seems like one. Being able to jump to the end of an interview more quickly when you're developing seems like another one to me that's worth prioritizing. Anything else like that? We did some internationalization stuff.
So I'm going to bring up again, like testing our code, like having tests for our code as a pain point that I experience on a regular basis. But I don't want to write tests for it if people are not bought into it, because I don't want to be the only one updating tests or interested in tests for our code. So I don't want to do it if I'm the only one that cares. I suppose, wish other people care. I hope other people care.
So we do have an agenda item for that already. Is that something you're thinking of separately for the sprint, or do you want it?
For the sprint?
All right. I guess we'll talk about that more. So all right, it sounds like there's not anything yet. People can obviously bubble up individual issues or add new things that like they didn't think of it until they're like, oh, we're going to have a 3-week chunk to work on it. Okay, looking at the list of other things we have here to talk about, it sounds to me like the demo from Lily would be one that is going to not require a lot of discussion. Might be good for us to jump into. So Lily, do you want to pull up your demo and show us what you're working on?
Sure.
Change this so it matches what we talked about.
All right, so here's so I did 2 things. One is I copied the footer of the assembly line and just adapted to the Weaver, and second I put it with colors. So if it's too much, just laugh.
Fair enough.
All right, so here's the thing. Some bars. Okay, there. So I changed the color of the header and the footer. And then here the links, instead of share, I changed to documentation, and which goes to the website here.
What did it go
That's
to
how
before?
I start to look into the details of the site. I think it's great. It's a great site. Just need more. We need to put more work into it. And then the about.
There was a share button on the other. Actually, let's think about that. We might want to add the share button in, right? Like I think we thought about having. So you might want to add a 4th icon. That's just one quick thought.
You do want the share button? Because this is the developers, right? This is not the users.
Well, when we had a cohort starting this summer, that was a need that they thought they found that they had.
Okay, so all right, so you want it. All right, that's fine.
Yeah. I like the colors. This is nice. I mean, it helps people know what screen they're on.
Yeah.
My feedback would be like, I think it's really important to not have to scroll on the first screen. So I would try to keep, that was why I shortened their draft, to keep it all above the fold, basically on a standard.
I use
if we
my screen resolution is very large font, so maybe you guys, when you look at it, it will be much smaller. Mine is just big.
I'd be surprised. Basically, I think this is about what you would get, like the 2 lines, 2 boxes, info boxes, basically, is what you could fit. Maybe we could move those to the under, so the continue button is there, but there's extra information below the button. I don't know.
Like this one. Put it under here.
Maybe. I don't know.
Because
Or
right
move
now
it to the
we
right.
so we have what the Weaver does, what you need to do, and then this is customized. And then this is
So-
done.
I feel
So I
like some
have-
of those.
Oh,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Michelle.
Barbara.
No,
Oh.
you have Mitchell.
Okay, so one thing is if it's editing content, I think like I can't read that fast. So like I'd want a chance to look over the content. But two things about the presentation of it. One is that I know usually animations are like not encouraged.
All right, then that's fine.
But I will say that I enjoy it. So I don't know I'm not saying let's take it away, but maybe we're thinking about or getting an actual designer who's unbiased to look at it or something. The other thing is that I really prefer colors to be informative, right? So if these have colors, then I'd be like, my first question looking at this was like, okay, so why is this one yellow and this one pink and this one green? So if they don't have a meaning, then I'm not sure about having kind of, colors randomly there. But
What about it, like use the same color with that?
Yeah,
Or no color?
that could use the same color, sure.
Another thought, you could use a background color and to replace the white.
This
That
is
could
like,
obviously not be a meaningful one. Oh, there is a background color. It's close to white.
I think he means a background color for the whole page. I like the text being in its own color. I do like the text, like things being in their own colors. I would also be curious about the code that you use to do this, because if you're using a lot of HTML, that's going to be frustrating to kind of keep up. And I'm otherwise
it's just
not sure
CSS.
how did you contain each of these sections?
I created like a panels. Should we?
Not HTML to create a panel.
I mean, how did you create those in the playground, in the text of the page? Like, can you show me the text of that first page where that is?
So that's,
So this is
all.
HTML. Okay. So that is a bit of a concern.
oh,
Is
actually, it's this one where it says.
Yep. Yep. So this has a bit of HTML
Yeah,
going on. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying may be harder to maintain over time, depending on who is editing it and how much they're paying attention and what our automated tests are.
that's why I'm only doing it in a Weaver. I'm not doing it in a assembly line, because this is we change the code. Other people don't.
I'm okay with adding a div. I think that's, but like, so if we were having if the lists were all hand coded, for example, that would be more challenging.
So
There is
for
an
example,
option to replace this, which would be like a function. Like if you look at the collapse element function, it uses a template block and it uses the subject would be replaced here, and then the content would be all of this stuff. So that's another way to like kind of hide some of the complexity. But then you have to go reference a different part. So that's just something to think about.
and things like the symbol, that circle symbol you had, I would at least want to make a template for it so that if I want to change it, I can just change it in one place, not in every single place. Though find and replace in like, standard text editors that aren't CodeMirror Online do a little bit better with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be one of the best features to add to the playground is a search and replace function.
Yes. But since the search function doesn't work, I wouldn't trust the search and replace function either.
So what I found, I think I have run into it once or twice since you've mentioned it. It's not very consistent error for me, but what I found is that there's the yellow highlights.
Mm-hmm.
Those always work, even if the next one doesn't work. So I think it's just
Good
a
to know.
button.
Oh, I never paid attention to that.
Good to know. Good to know. That will save some time.
So that's the div symbol, or what is it?
I mean, so
Like a HTML?
I think Michelle's point about keeping them consistent is really worth thinking about. So that might mean you don't, I like these panels. I think they're going to be really helpful. Do we want to generate those panels using the same style that we're generating them for the collapse template, where it's using a template, and then it pulls in the subject that would handle all the things that we basically kind of commented on for the HTML issue. You would insert the template with wrapped in a function basically here. So that would make it less discoverable. You wouldn't jump, you have to jump here, figure out, oh, what template is it referencing, and then go to the template. But you wouldn't have to see the hand-coded HTML stuff. That would all be handled in the module.
So thought.
Or if you're just using one div and you're like, oh, I'm going to keep these all the same color, you wouldn't need to have separate divs. I think one div for sure people can handle, like edit what's inside the div.
I personally, the advantage I see of what it does visually now is that it separates those different sections for me. Like, I find that very visually useful. So if we do all the background, or if we do all the background of all the text, that for me loses a lot of the advantage of the color as it is now.
It's just,
Yeah, that's
if
true.
we change it to one color, what's the effect?
Yeah, let's try it.
But I think once you reduce
That is still
it, like,
helpful to me.
to 2, so these aren't going to be one paragraph. Oh, that's the thing, is like, are there some other HTML elements that are built in? Can we stick with like semantic HTML? But it seems like probably not.
I mean, if we're writing the HTML, we can.
Section would still work well for this problem.
A section, like a
Yep.
on a rule,
Section.
you mean?
No, the
Well,
tag section.
Yeah, just the section HTML section tag we were talking about semantic HTML.
Oh, okay.
Because even they're, and I guess even paragraph.
That's what I
It's
was
an auto
wondering,
thing on
like,
paragraph,
one thing
maybe.
there.
I'm not
Yep.
sure about the contents of a paragraph, if it can only
multiple
be
lines.
certain, it can be multiple lines, but I'm not sure it can be headings and things. Like, we'd have to check on, there's a hierarchy for like what
you're right.
P
Yeah.
tags are supposed to contain. So
That makes sense. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, this is not, I don't think it's too overwhelming the way that it's working now, but what other people think about encapsulating it in a function? That made a lot of sense for the collapse template. I didn't really like it at first when I saw that was taken from something Jonathan did. I was doing them all manually at first, but
I think if we're going to,
more detailed.
I think if we're going to do this, then I think a function would be more effective, like easier to maintain than doing it as separate divs.
I'm a bit. Well, I guess if you think of it this way, the class, the panel, like panel yellow class, is a function that's applying like the actual CSS to whatever like is inside of that div. And maybe that's just me, but I feel like, and maybe this is just because I'm not a like true professional front-end developer, but I've never really understood the React way sort of doing things of like, oh, here's like this very secretive like block that you're inserting with other arbitrary things, and it feels like the function sort of is very similar to that. And so I feel like you read code more often than we're actually maintaining it. Like, more often we're going to be reading through this and mostly looking for bugs. And so I feel like anytime you add like a extra function on top of that, it's a lot more difficult to, I have to like look at, okay, I don't remember what this function does. Let me go like find, I know where it is at least. And so it's like still sort of discoverable, but I have to go and find that function separately, look at it, be like, okay, it's not doing anything weird. It's likely not that, but I'm going to read that a lot more often than I would, than I will actually changing in like maintaining and changing what that function does.
Maybe.
And so, and so I feel like it's a lot more, even if you have to look and see what the CSS is exactly for like the div, it's a lot easier to look at a div and say, that's a div. That's fine. It's being encountered. It's like, this is a really simple thing. And then it's like, whatever I'm trying to figure out is not here. And then go on.
Yeah, I do think it could be become a maintainability problem. Say we want to change something, then changing it everywhere becomes, so it depends what the future of this thing is, right? Which we don't know yet. I also am curious if just having horizontal rules without the color would separate things sufficiently. So if we were to remove the divs and if we were just to do 3 dashes, do you know what horizontal rules? Have you done those before, Lily?
HR now. Is that
Sure. But in Markdown, you can just do 3 horizontal dashes. You dash, dash, dash on a line, and it'll put a horizontal rule in there.
Okay, so this is just to show you what I tried as
Sure.
to what we eventually decided what to do. That so let me just finish.
Yeah.
So this also I changed the color of all the titles.
Oh, I see.
And I just want to show you the download screen where I also
So I guess you're right. This is kind of a smaller screen, huh? Or is it zoomed in a bit? The text of the fields looks a lot larger, huh? Is that just because your screen is smaller, Lily, or is that something else that changed?
The text of the
I-
fields looks larger. The text to
me-
me, all the text looks smaller in general. Like this looks like a different
Proportionate to
font.
the
Oh, I changed the color of the title. I didn't touch.
You didn't change any
font.
other text. Okay.
Okay, it's just
Okay,
colors
so
then.
here's the download screen. I separate them into 3 panels. So that's the package,
panels are
that's
helpful
the
here, too.
interview. And this is the advanced where I also added more subtitles because otherwise these two can be like people would think it's the one same thing, but it's not. So I separate.
Yeah, I like the panels on this screen too. And I think the same thing about the color being consistent for all 3 panels is probably a good one.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay. So I just make
Yeah,
same color.
unless there's, yeah, like you could make maybe the advanced one different because it's advanced. That one could be red, for example.
Okay.
You don't want people, it's like warning. I don't know. But I think the other 2 have the same priority.
These two, okay,
So those
you're
probably
right.
the same color.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a good direction. I think also we don't need the debug info on the top of the screen, so I would take that out. I don't think that'll help users of this particular interview. It's more for testers, right? And when we're developing it, we can use the source button to get the ID. I don't know what other people think about that, but is that only showing in the playground?
I don't know. Good question. I never tried to really run it for it.
That would be this default screen part. So did that come from code that you added, or is it from including another file that it got inserted there? It must be code you added because it doesn't say ID in front of it.
I don't remember I did it consciously.
Okay, let's see if we can find it under screen part. Just try searching for screen part in the
Okay.
playground.
Right here.
Yeah, in the search box, just type screen space part, and let's just see if that pops up. It would be default screen part, no underscore.
Space.
Okay,
Space,
maybe it's
Space.
Screen space.
Underscore.
Screen space.
No, that's one that's commented out.
Oh, right. Okay, so it's the footer where I actually added
Something is adding the ID to
okay.
the top of the screen.
Oh, it's pulling in document assembly line AL general, and that has the ID thing on when you're on development.
This is a module though, so that's not quite from that.
But
But it could be another file that's being included. So let's look for another default screen parts. Yeah, you can copy the whole thing. That's actually the text, the exact text we want.
Doesn't AL general include the?
Modules don't do anything with the DML. So we're going to want to find the one that's for the
Oh, I
pre
see.
area, I believe.
What is it?
You can look for pre-colon, PRE colon.
You could do that too, yeah. So it's not in this file. It's in one of the files that we're including. Pre-colon, yeah. So it's obviously not in this file either. What other files are included?
Can you look for
AL
include?
visual or visual.yaml really is, but only visual.yaml. Okay, well, that's something to track down.
I think
I would
I
say
think
that-
visual.yaml is where it is.
But why, when she searched for it, did we not find it?
Well, it's not in AL Weaver. It's going to be in the assembly line. I think I don't know how you're pulling in.
Or is there an include statement in here in this file?
I don't
How about
know,
the-
but
How about I just do it that way and see if we can,
I think it
Yeah,
might-
it could be.
it's still here.
yeah.
So it's not that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I know where it's coming from. You're on the doc. Okay. It's the configuration. on
Mass legal
server.
health.
I forgot that
Mm,
Caroline
Alright.
said a while ago. She did something in the configuration on that server.
All right, so I'm
worry
innocent.
about that.
I didn't do
You
it.
are, but yeah, we're all. I
We
think
might want to
there's
turn that
no-
off.
no
Or maybe
blame.
Caroline wants it, so maybe we shouldn't turn it off.
Yeah.
That's just your server, so that's not something we're
Yeah. Okay, so that's all my idea. Oh, this about thing, I copied, basically copied, replicated what's in assembly line has and.
Mhm.
Oh, wait, wait. Click the-
So one idea for how to keep all this information on the front screen is to just use you could use like a collapsible element.
Oh, wait a
That's
second. Come on.
People can click on it to see, read more if they want.
So my suggestion for the front screen would be like, what actually needs to be on the front screen? So there's because there's a bit about like what you need to have done right now. There's a bit about like an introduction to this tool, and then there's like learn more and like customize your interview. Learn more and customize your interview seem like they're more of later on in the interview or like at the very end. And what you need to do seems to be like the only thing that maybe needs to be visible. Like I feel even though like welcome to this interview could be like a help screen or something. Or like some more information about this interview, maybe learn more, go there too. But I feel like that's one,
Yeah.
like at least
Yeah.
that's just like
If we're looking at content,
collapsible stuff.
if we're looking at content, I think there's some more editing to do in general. So I don't know if do we want to dive into content right now? Do we have time?
I think we probably should try to move on to the rest of our agenda. But yeah, like, so I think, yeah, like that could probably go in the about page, right? To learn more. Yeah, I think we should probably pause here, but hopefully this is some good feedback, Lily. I think something you could do if you were ready to merge it now would be like, I like the colors. That helps give a clear visual identity for what tool people are using. And then there's work to do with the panels and the content. But everyone all right if we continue to our other agenda items now? Sorry, Lily, you had a question, so we can jump to that.
Yeah, so what's the consensus of, do we make it a function or do we use div? Because I feel div is more in the plain side, it's easier.
I mean, there's nothing stopping us from moving the div to a function later. So I'm okay
Oh,
with
okay,
starting
right.
with the function,
Yeah.
especially when it's just used in one place right now. I do see us needing this in other interviews. And I think there's some symmetry in following how we use collapse element to create a function eventually. But we can keep having the discussion.
Yeah, I think right now this is in Weaver, so it's only for the developers. But if we want to put it into assembly line, then it's all the end users. that will see the colors. So that will be more involved. Well, but then it's more complicated because the interview creator can change their theme, and so we want to consider how we, don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, we might use some of the built-in colors because
Yeah, that's actually another piece of feedback. I would say like we should use Bootstrap classes for that. So like success, failure, and so on, instead of yellow, red, and purple. So that way people change their theme, it will update to match the theme colors. Doesn't mean we shouldn't make people have a chance to override it, but I think the default interaction should probably be to use the theme colors.
That's one thought. Another thought that I have is that we can theme the screens that we can control. For example, the preview or edit. I mean what is it? Review screen and a download screen, where because we generate from our functions then we can more control there.
what?
Not sure if I know what you mean actually, Lily. Like what are you saying we would do on the review screen?
Because okay, when people have either their own questions or text, and then when they change their theme, that will have effect on that. But what we generated from our functions that are displayed on the screen, then that's outside of their control. That's where we can add our own touch of the panel or color.
I think you're right. I mean, I'm not sure where we'd want to use those info panels other than like, I think I first thought we should add it on the about page. That was the first place I wanted to add one. That's on every interview, but I'm not sure if there are any auto-generated contents where we would want to add color panels. Maybe once we do this design work with theory and principle for up to code, they'll have some ideas.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But it's a good open question. So let's see, like, where do we want to use? Okay, so I'm just gonna write that down for now.
Okay, good.
Okay. Let me see, looking at our list here, we've talked about the sprint, we've talked about these Weaver design changes. I feel like we've actually covered this. Well, maybe not. That's not actually true.
No, that's a separate one. Yeah.
Let's save some time to see if there's anyone who's interested in looking at that further. Michelle, you have a couple things on here. I'm gonna just under speed up stuff, just write in. I'm a little worried about what the scope of this change for background generation will be, but it also feels like we probably need it. Maybe
I feel like we need it. That was the only thing I was gonna say. I worked a little bit on it last week, and I was having some trouble, but it was like trouble with like should be basic-ish doc symbol stuff. Like essentially, I found Quinn when you asked Jonathan about like how to do some of this, and I was just having trouble getting it actually triggering. But okay. I do think we do need to look into the background assembly stuff because it feels like it's happening a lot for like a lot of different students, and we can speed it up as much as we can, but I feel like just the speed ups are going to take longer to get back around to us and are going to take more time. And when it feels like there are a lot of different things that could cause things to slow down. And so like we could do a lot of work and fix one person's issue and everyone else would still have background, like timeout issues. It's mostly the timeout issues. Like it's less of like, oh, this is a bad user experience, which it always has been, but it's more of now there are actually students are getting timeouts on things. So
yeah. Well, I think
hang on.
Still there is
okay.
like, is it lower?
You
What?
just turned into a monster and I didn't hear anything you said. The sound, it just went a bit crazy, that's all.
Okay. So yeah, is this actually slower than stock DocAssemble assembly? That's something that's kind of an unanswered question still. Because then it feels like we could work on bottlenecks in our own code, but
I don't know the answer to that.
We do probably need to check. It's a combination. It's like a weird thing of, which I think we talked a little about last time, was that it's a combination of I don't know if it's normally slower than DocAssemble at this point. We do need to, I think we have a handful of like, this interview is slow. We need to just go back go and hand edit the student's interview to see like if we removed all of the AL documents, if that would be the case. But there's also even the case of even if we were at parity with DocAssemble speeds, the way that we're generating final is that, or essentially like, say you have one interview, there's one document. It's like the final interview document. There's no preview versus final. As you're going through the interview, DocAssemble is already checking, oh, does this variable exist? Does this variable exist? Does this variable exist? And starting to like assemble each page or as it goes on, especially if there are like multiple attachments that you're generating. So by the end of the interview, you hit sign, it's already generated all of the documents that don't have signatures on them or the attachments that don't have signatures on them, and it's checked most of the other variables. And so it goes through and it's a really quick process, essentially sort of amortizing like the cost of assembling the entire document over the whole interview. But with the split between preview and final, all of the work has to happen between the signature page and the end of the interview. Sorry, just that on my side. But and that's like one of the issues I think that like we can't really get around just because of how we've split it up between preview and final. Like we're not going to be able to hit native DocAssemble speeds there. We might be able to hit native DocAssemble speeds elsewhere, but it's like a weird case, I feel. That's it. But that was just my main thoughts there.
well, I think like another point, like one of the reasons we created AL document was to get rid of the issue of recalculating the final screen, right? Like we wanted to hide all of that need so that people always got a fresh document if they went back and edited some text on the final screen. So I don't know if that part is something we could get around either.
Just we're trying to get
Actually, it's an interesting question what you said, Bryce. I don't know that actually, I don't think that DocAssemble does anything to pre-generate the file as you're going through the interview. Like it all happens on the download point, but
well, okay, you're right. It's not pre-generating, but if you have multiple attachments, if one attachment gets completed, you're no longer going through and regenerating that attachment on like the next screen or the next screen. It generates the attachment, it goes to the following attachment, starts generating it. I'm missing this question, it asks that question, and I don't think it would redo everything from that original attachment in the first place, which I think is what might be happening.
Yeah, and so the question is like, what can we background assemble? What can't we? I mean, then there's like a directionality for us to think about. Like, do we want to focus on generating the whole screen in the background, or do we want to do on-demand generation where we think we could get away with not generating documents so people request them? I think for things like, here's a copy of all of the whole document put together, we could defer that because people won't always need or want that. The zip file we could defer till people click on the link. Maybe where people have an option of a view button and a download button, we can defer converting docx to PDFs.
That's fair. Wouldn't we still have like, even if we defer it, wouldn't we still be getting timeout errors though? Like if it's taking too long there?
Oh,
that's what I'm worried about, honestly.
And have a background assembly. Like, so do we want to have everything background assembled, do everything? Or do we want to just background assemble one document at a time? And then we should think about what the interface for the person is. Like, maybe we should let them see a spinner on screen instead of taking them to a separate page, which is less DocAssemble-ish, but probably nicer for them to look at.
Well, we could bring them to separate screen with a spinner, right?
Yeah, we could do that too. But
yeah.
Yeah, because like I think the default way would be like a refresh the page every 10 seconds until the background process is done. That would be the simplest to do, but it might not be that nice. I'm worried that we did all this work, and I haven't actually looked at it, all this work to make sure that documents are cached per page load. And I don't know how that interacts with background assembly.
Yeah.
Maybe fine. And we want to make sure that people can refresh that, right? If they reloaded this, if they clicked the edit button on the download screen after we did the background assembly, do they still have the ability to get a new refreshed copy of the documents? That's where I was thinking I haven't dived into it yet, but that's where I was thinking there'd be some hairiness.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
if any background, that should be the starting point, because if you do it before, you won't be reflecting the editing.
I suppose if it's slower, but it happens in the background, that's not the end of the world, as long as people aren't hitting timeouts. I'm just wondering if like some of the way we optimized our generation was to use a cache. And I'm wondering if that will still, if the cache will still work, basically.
What
If it's
I
a celery process.
from when I was looking into background stuff, it seems like it's difficult to pass anything from celery processes to your main process. Like it's possible, but I don't know how easy it is to pass a lot of different things from the background process to the non-background process.
Yeah, you can do it. That's something but then the question is like, what's the atomic layer that we do?
Yeah.
Do we do everything? And it sounds like there's always going to be some edge case where a document just takes a long time to generate. So maybe we should just do everything in the background. Mm-hmm. And maybe for caching and safety reasons, we should generate everything, even if we don't know if people will use everything. Mm-hmm. I think some of the timeouts that users are getting, that our developers are getting, are because they're sharing a server, and anytime they save code, it restarts the Nginx process.
Yeah.
Other timeouts. But
that's right.
Anyway, because I'm not getting that. I mostly use the test server, and I'm not competing with the people restarting the server. I don't get those as often, so I'm thinking that's part of the reason. But I'm sure that they wouldn't happen as much if people weren't trying to do long running processes with competing with other people. All right, that's probably as much as we can talk about there.
Yeah.
I still think it's going to take a little while to finish it, but I'm thinking I'll probably try to work on the background assembly. But Bryce, unless you had any,
I can point you to the small branch that I did last week that I was trying and sort of gave up on for the bit. I'll add that link in this.
Okay. Talk. The other thing that I have that just reminded me that I was kind of taking point on was the AL exhibit class. So that actually also is going to use background assembly. So maybe there's some overlap, but I probably should get that into a point where we can get the MVP up and running and get a review on it so we can merge the MVP version of it. Okay, thanks. Okay. Let me just touch on package scope boundary. I think, Michelle, you raised a good point about that. What I think we should probably do is to go through our packages. Michelle, since you had some thoughts on it, I don't know if you wanted to take it on.
If so, can I reopen the issue so we can take notes in the issue?
Well, I don't think an issue, the problem with an issue there is that it's not like, when do we close the issue, right? Like I'd like issues to be things that we can act on the repository they're assigned to.
If you want, I can say decide.
Not touching anything in that repository, so which made it kind of a tricky one to keep there.
I mean, I would like it to be an issue somewhere. I have trouble keeping track of stuff. So if it's just out in the ether, it's not gonna really come back onto my radar. I mean, I think there is one on assembly line, which is the feedback part of the thing. I think like there's other things I've been making that I've been like, wow, I wish I could just get the feedback, form in here. So
Are there, so like I guess like here's what I think really we're saying is like, should we think about which functionality goes into which repository, right? So I think to do that, we need to have kind of a big picture idea of like what our thought is for what purpose of different repos is.
Can we make an issue for it somewhere? Can we think of a place to make an issue for it?
So I'd like to just have someone like start by just saying, well, here's what I think they are.
But where do those notes go?
It sounds kind of like it's on the toolbox because that's the only place you're saying, I want this to be a toolbox feature. That would make sense to me if you're like, hey, let's add this or take this from this other one. But I think the descriptive task could also be on the documentation page.
Okay, I can move it to the toolbox.
But what I think what we need to do is not to say like, either you could have a specific issue that says like, let's move this feature here, or we could describe all of our repositories. But just like, it feels like an agenda item so far. So if you want to put an issue with it, put it on the toolbox for now. I think we just need to go through like, what are our repos, what features, what functionality should be in each repo. That seems like a descriptive thing. Then we can triage based on that.
Okay.
Actual specific features we want to parse out, right? So it's a more of a meta thing first. I find it distracting when agenda items get put on interact with them again, right? Like, because then how do we, like our issue list shouldn't be expanding forever. We should be able to close some of the things at some point. So
is it a problem with adding more issues, or is it a problem with
issues that can't be acted on on that repo? That's, I think, challenging. So if we can,
okay, I won't always know, but we can definitely, if there's one that doesn't fit, we can definitely discuss like what is a better way to handle it. Like, I'm not going to be able to predict like or do it right all the time. So yeah. We can definitely.
No, of course not. Yeah. That's, I think it's like a case-by-case thing. But we could use threads on the teams. We could use issues on, if there's some kind of things.
I couldn't understand what you said. You're breaking up a lot today. I mean, not breaking up, whatever it is.
All right. Like, you're taking more time telling me that than it takes just.
But I can't understand what you're saying.
All right. We will just take that case by case. I just wanted to explain why I didn't want to keep that issue there.
Okay.
So, all right. I would like to see if anybody wanted to explore more getting the syntax highlighting to work with PyDoc, but I understand the answer might be no. But does anybody want to do that?
And give me a direction. I don't know anything about PyDoc.
So the only thing is that you will need to be able to generate you'll need to have the documentation repo downloaded locally. You're going to need to have the assembly line repo downloaded locally, and you'll need to have the PyDoc command installed via pip. So I know Michelle I think you have it set up now, but you had some trouble getting it set up. Lily, I don't know if you had started setting up.
I'm not sure mine is working.
No, then in that case, I don't want to.
Okay. So it sounds like either Bryce or me, but probably with Bryce's time, it should probably continue to be me. Okay. All right. So that's all for that. So Michelle, do you want to talk about your regression tests that we should have had?
I think there have been, some occasions on which it would have definitely helped catch something that wasn't caught. It certainly, for me, would help define behavior, even if we just had like interviews that were dedicated to, for example, if we had one that was dedicated to AL documents and just like a bunch of pages that were all different permutations of how to use the AL document, right? Like that would help for me, it would help me understand the different ways to use AL documents so that the process would be outlined a bit more clearly instead of ad hoc trying to trigger behavior that I'm trying to test. And then when new behavior is added, we can add that to that interview, whether that is then automatically tested or whether that is then just more easy to manually test is a different question for me at the moment, but just an easier way to keep track of the behaviors we want. And that kind of thing.
Can you like tell us like, so I think so what are you looking for like in a little bit more specific? So those are some things you wanted to have covered, but yeah, tell us, like walk us through like what you're looking at. What would we need to implement?
So for example, we would make an interview called test docs, I don't know. And then in that interview, we would have pages, one page where there was only one document in a bundle and we would see if a zip was created, another page where there were multiples and there were docx's and PDFs. And you wouldn't have to test, like you could test multiple things on one page as long as we made sure we were, that this is an example. I feel like we get lost a lot of times between what's an example and like, what are the actual goals? So this is not like the thing that I want. This is an example of the type of thing that I would want. This is one of the things that I want for sure, but I'd like that kind of thing elsewhere too, with other functionalities. So, there would be one page or like there would be one table possibly for that would just have a bundle that just has a single document and it would have the download HTML table for it. And then there would be another table that would have a bundle that has a docx and a PDF and whatever that requested the docx format. Then there would be another table that requested the PDF format. Then there would be, all these different iterations of functionality that we have, like to just define them and like produce them for is this becoming, Bryce, do you hear what I'm saying at all?
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, so we do have a test file that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
However, that
So I'm
test
just
file
wondering-
has primarily been used for like, I'm testing this specific feature. I'm going to add it to this test file. I think what Michelle is talking about is like much more of a like equivalent unit test of every single thing, like coverage-based unit test of every single thing in AL document that's doing something like that. And so it would be
Like, not one that I would edit ad hoc to add the behavior that is particularly being edited
Yeah.
right now. One that would always have all the behaviors that need to be working.
yes. Yeah,
So like, what would that be? What would the test be? It would be a YAML
be-
file like
is
what we
it-
have now, but just more standardized content.
No, so at least in my mind, it would be so like the YAML file we have now is it's useless. Like I find myself commenting out like all of the random things that everyone else has added in the past because that was checking some very specific functionality that like is either like has been working fine and is just sort of getting in the way, or I have to just comment out a bunch of stuff so I don't have to. It's more of a manual, like I am less of a test and more of a I'm manually trying to get a handle on using this library because this is the easiest way you can actually like develop and use that library.
Right.
It would be a like more the equivalent of like how we I guess if there would be a way to write a unit test in DocAssemble that wasn't like Cucumber, it would be this of like you pre-populate some like users or like the minimum amount of objects that you need to generate a file, and then in our case, or generate not a file, generate like an AL document or an AL document bundle. Like you're not going to ask the user any questions or anything like that because that's not the purpose of this interview. But then you just be able to click through and it would on like one per screen or like a few per screen, it would go through and call all of the different functions that we have on like AL document. So it'd be like AL document as PDF, like, yep, this is the link to the PDF that I wanted. Maybe call it with a few different of the, like show the difference between yes, preview doesn't have the, or like here's a link to the preview document, doesn't have signatures. Here's a link to the final document, does have signatures. Like as docx shows the docx and not the PDF. Essentially just going through each of these like functions that we currently have, which if we tried to add that to like the existing YAML file, that wouldn't be useful because that's one YAML file for the entire for like
Behavior.
the entire it would be like one YAML file for, or right now it's one YAML file for the entire package. And so if you're just trying to go through and like add more tests or check a single part of behavior, it's not useful anymore.
What if there was like a menu? So part of my question is like, so how are we going to run this file and how will we verify the output? And the other one is because the way you develop AL document it is really helpful to have a file in the same package to just change the functionality you care about that time.
It would be in the same package.
No, I'm
It
not
doesn't
saying
have to move packages.
So I think we probably want to keep that file. That was really my only point.
We just want to make new files in there. We don't want to
So
make a new file somewhere else.
You're not answering the part that I was questioning. So would it be helpful to have like a menu driven file? You're like, okay, run this test for people who wanted to do it manually. And then how do we automate this? Or are we even talking about automating it?
Running it right now would just be running the interview and seeing and being able to test the various things because they're all laid out for you and making sure that they're behaving as you expect. That's what it would be right now. That's, I think that's where it starts.
So why is the file that we have now, should that be the base? I mean, I'm just wondering, when would we run it and how would someone know that it's valid? And how long would it take to run that interview if it's manual?
So if it is manual, then it would be its own separate interview. So they would run it by pressing save and run or run, right? And it would just there would be another file called test docs or whatever, right? Instead of AL question test, I think all the test ones should start with test. I think AL questions test should at least just say test questions. But so test docs, and you would run it. And then ideally we would have written on the pages and next to the tables, right above the tables, what the behavior of the table would be if it's working. And someone would manually do it. And if they didn't want to check on one of those, then they'd skip to the next page. You check on what you check on. It takes as long as you want it to take or need it to take.
So I guess I'm not sure what your ask is exactly.
So I guess, my view on that, like just checking on what you check on and doing what you do.
For now, this is not the permanent situation. I'm trying to give us an MVP version of this.
But the thing is the MVP version of this is either going to, like, it's going to do what a lot of like tests that aren't maintained will, if they're not like automatically continuously run on every commit, do, and they're going to start failing. And they're, if it's, especially if we want to be comprehensive with like checking, and that's the thing, Michelle, is I feel like the one issue that I have in mind of like what this would be fixing is the PR that I made last week that like there's a function on AL document that was download HTML. We had sort of switched to only using download list HTML and pretty much everywhere. And so download HTML was just completely wrong, and it like was calling a wrong version of table row with like the wrong arguments. And so that would have caught that because an error would have showed up and would have been really obvious that this was broken. But I don't think any, but like you'd have to, in order for that to actually, to get to the point where you see it's broken, you'd have to have a really long interview that's calling all of these different things that then if people only go through it so many times, like it might get caught, or like, so like it might get caught like a week or so after it's broken, but it might just get caught. I didn't even find it by checking it. I just found it by like looking at the code and was like, hey, this isn't right.
So like, I thought by proposing it this way, it would be easier to adopt and easier for people to start on. What I'd like is to have an automated test that would run the interview. And it would be able to check certain things. It would be able to press download at the very least, and we could, by eye, make sure that we have the right files downloaded at the end. It would be able to continue on every page, so it makes sure that no page causes an error. It would be able to, like look
So
for certain.
When I was
link-
asking like what your ask was, Michelle, like, are you asking someone to write this interview? Are you asking for permission to do it? Are you trying to get some more ideas for what the scope?
I'm trying to understand if this is something that more than just me wants, because I can write the interview, but if this is not going to be kept up or updated, or like if I'm the only one that's bought into this, I'm not going to be able to like do that.
Okay, I think it sounds like a good incentive to consider all these possibilities. Now, in this case that Bryce just described, if we were doing what he just said, let's say I'm just combining Quentin's and Michelle's comments together. Let's say we have this drop down where you can pick up, I want to test this table, or I want to test that whatever. If we on this drop down, we can test, okay, I just want to test download. In that case, would it be able to catch the error that Bryce just described?
I mean, yes, I assume so. I mean, it would load, it wouldn't be able to, it would error when the page tried to load.
Yeah. So I guess
But in that case,
But ideally it would be done on every commit, right? Like the test would be run on every commit.
that's, yeah. So I was gonna say, I feel like the thing I'm realizing is what I didn't quite was able to get to is I think of an MVP as the minimum amount that will always run, and like the viable part of minimum viable is always running on each commit. So like some sort of Cucumber like functionality on our repos is more viable than recovering everything, and someone has to manually go through that, because
I just thought it'd be harder to get buy-in on like writing the thing to begin with and like maintaining it. So
I think the problem is like I don't know, maybe Bryce has written some of these tests, but I'd say like every week I don't know what the testing framework is or how to access it. So if that starts there, like I think we would need to be brought in to the process there a bit more.
and I would love to bring everyone who wants to come in into the process.
Way, so it doesn't absorb the whole project, right? Because yeah.
okay.
I just haven't seen that as a.
It needs to have some finality too. But
I just haven't seen
is
that.
there a way for
like-
us to do something a little smaller where you could run? Well, I mean, I'm not saying this is a replacement at all, but if we're talking about manual tests that anybody can edit, is there a way to do that in DocAssemble that doesn't have to happen after a GitHub action, or is it not really? Just trying to think about this, like clicking save and run and getting a report that says, yep, this worked, this worked, this worked. That's easier than clicking through on each screen and comparing the output to some ideal output. But maybe we want something like both because there's some errors that you can't ever catch just with code. I don't know. Or are there unit tests that we could write for we're talking about AL document, I mean, it's a Python file. So can we write regular Python unit tests for that file? And would that have caught, that could have caught the download HTML bug, right?
Yeah, like
Would
there's some Python.
Yeah,
because
probably would have.
It's just
It
a
just
Python.
generates a string.
Yeah, and that's the thing is but the thing is that like that's like as we move like you're right, like that could have catch that, like just a unit test could have caught that bug, and that would be doable.
Yeah,
But
that
like
too.
if it's anything else on top of that, you'd have to start writing like, okay, let's start parsing this HTML. Is it correct HTML? Did we have like a mistype somewhere in the table generation that a browser would freak out if we gave it that or something? And at that, and like very quickly after that, it starts to get into, you might as well just start writing a Cucumber test for it.
Okay. So that won't be a very productive way to go. But what about, is there anything we could get from running on one screen and not manually comparing output? Where are we going to edit these tests? I guess that's a big question. So if we're editing a YAML file, that is a regular assemble interview file.
Yep.
That is a place where everybody has the ability to start contributing to maintaining tests. If we're editing the like regular Cucumber tests, that's probably a harder entry point because I don't think all of us are familiar with the syntax of that. And it's our own homegrown syntax where everything might not be written down or how to use it yet. So people can't necessarily experiment with it on their own. So I'm just wondering where we're going to do the maintenance of the tests, I guess.
If we have it all on one page or on 2 pages, that is if we don't change the variables that are needed. When we change something that is going to break the test, then the test needs to be updated. Like, and something like that is putting a new page at the beginning of the interview that isn't defined in the test yet, right? Like if you haven't told it, hey, this page exists and you need to get past it, that might not work. It might actually with the table, but it depends if you're setting variables or not.
I understand tests need to be updated. I'm just wondering, where do we update them?
In the sources folder.
And what would the file be?
It would be a .feature file, files ending in .feature.
So is it a text file?
Yep, it's edited as text.
And then uploaded to the source.
And then you commit, just like you
So
do
you
with other.
There'd be 2 parts to it, right? Because that feature file is updating. It's running a YAML file interactively.
Yes.
But
So if you
presumably,
change,
adding a test, you would add it to the YAML file and to the feature file. But
for this, yeah, actually, no, that's true, because this is a weird case where it's a library. There aren't like inherently interviews that are using all of its functionality. So for this, specifically, it would be a lot easier for something like the Weaver, where like the final interview, we'd always be running that if we were running tests. But in this case, we would always be, we would have to add some functionality if it's new or if it's slightly changed, and like it's a change that you'd have to fix in the YAML. You'd have to fix this test AL document.yaml and the feature feature file. You'd have to change both. But that's only because this is like a library and not like a real interview by itself.
and
I mean, when you change a
files-
real interview, you also have to update the tests. When you change code, you have to update tests. That's
No, I'm saying, yeah, but you always have to change a feature interview. But I'm saying in this case, like we're primarily writing Python, but you also have to update both the .feature and the .yaml test, as opposed to just the .feature. And like you're testing what's in your interview already, or like what other code you're writing under test already. there's an extra layer between what's under test and what the feature can run, or the dot feature can run.
Okay.
And the feature files are they're testing. Are they testing getting to the end of the interview? Mostly,
They're
or is it
testing
possible
whatever you want to test. They don't need to get to the end of an interview.
you could have it look for text on the screen, for example.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's flexibility for what the test can discover.
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility there, I think. And but even then, like that's what I think is the minimum part of that is just, can you get to the end of the interview without Doxable throwing a narrative away?
You
And
can
that's a
have
very
one that's,
simple dot feature file, right?
you can just have one that's
yeah,
you would have the variables in a table, and as long as it got to the end, it would be happy.
Mhm.
In fact, I think if all you have is continue buttons, a table, you could just put one variable in and the table could get itself the rest of the way there. You know what? No. Yes. No, it doesn't do that anymore because that was causing issues. So, but you have to set the variable on the page, but it will get through to the end.
What do you? Well,
It can be very easy to write a test that just goes all the way to the end if all you have are continue buttons. So we can also have fields reset, but there can definitely be a happy path that just goes all the way to the end. And then you can have other tests that test more specific things if you want, or you can combine them or whatever.
So, I mean, that seems to make sense. I guess my question is like, where do we want to put? I do worry about people getting lost in a million, because there's no subdirectories in a million test YAML files. But if we had a million feature files, that's not as big of a problem, especially for this, for the AL document, for the assembly line runtime package.
I think it'll also help if we have tests at the beginning of every test file, because then they'll all stay in the same place. People don't have to pay as much attention to them.
I still think it will be a problem to have 30 files there that you get.
Oh, do we need 30? Do we
Well,
need
I
that?
don't know how many we need.
Yeah, I don't think
Do
you
we-
would need 30.
We
I
need
think we
like
would-
one, just
maybe-
to test the docs, you just need one file. Like, you don't
Do
need
we
more
want
than,
just, so how granular would the report be if it failed? That's what I'm starting to think about. So if we got a failed test, would it be able to tell us which feature broke? If we didn't have a separate feature file for each thing?
well,
Would it
you
say
can
it
have
got
different
broken, or would it say-
scenarios. So first of all, you said multiple feature files were okay. So that's different than, I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're like describing. Like if there are 30 feature files, it will tell you which scenario it broke on. And it'll tell you the tags of the various tests, which you don't have to think about right now if you don't want to, but it will include the scenario names that failed.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is where in between scenarios and YAML files that we would need. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
You could have multiple scenarios for one YAML file.
That's all I'm
In
trying
my
to
in my mind,
Okay,
I think
got it.
you would want one like test something dot YAML. You would want one of those probably per like Python file that we have. So we have like 3 Python files, like AL Quartz, AL Document, AL General. We could definitely stick with those 3, and you'd have multiple, like Michelle just said, you could have multiple scenarios going through and checking different parts of those YAMLs. Or like different, like just different parts of those YAMLs. But we could definitely have not a ton.
Okay. And less important, but just out of curiosity, you could have more than one scenario in each dot feature file. That doesn't have to be a one-to-one mapping.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a good plan. I guess I'm just curious, like you sounded like there was something you were expecting people to do that wasn't happening, or that people were actively working against. So I'm just wondering if we basically, is it just to like figure out, should you do this, or was I wrong about that?
Well, this doesn't seem to have been, like, I've brought up stuff like this before, and like,
So they're just the four of
hasn't
us,
been
right?
taken-
And only some of us are working full time and can't all do everything. So
I wasn't asking, I just wanted to understand whether there's any buy-in, because every time I bring it up, it's let's discuss it another time. And like we don't get anywhere with this, and it's never been put into issues or made a priority. So for me, it's hard to see that it would be something that anyone else would do at any point. Like, it just doesn't seem like
I'm just trying to figure
they
out
want to do it.
that
So
question. So yeah, so is it that there, so if the question is like, will people appreciate this if we do it? And will people help edit it? That's different. I just wanted to make sure I'm answering that question.
Yes, personally, to answer that question, Michelle, I feel like I know you've been doing a ton of work on the like Cucumber side of document of doing things, but I also know that like it's getting close and it's a lot closer, I feel, but I still feel like you've said that we're like not quite to MVP of like what you'd want this like students to be doing. And if I had a bit more time and I wasn't trying to full time on the Tyler stuff right now, I would love to spend a day or two in myself and just dive in. And so I could start doing a lot of this stuff myself, but I don't quite have the time to dive in and spend a few days getting up to it. And I feel like you're probably the only person who one has the or one has like both the knowledge and a bit of the time to like get over the initial hump. I feel like the hardest part of writing tests, honestly, is setting up the framework of like, okay, this file needs to go here and this is the GitHub action that runs. And so I feel like if you were to set up, like go through the setup essentially on AL, on like the assembly line repo to just get those feature files in and to get the GitHub actions like all clicked in and together, I would love to, and it would definitely like keep those maintained and make sure they're still running on all the, if they start failing and stuff. It's a lot easier to fix a failure, at least from my perspective, it's a lot easier to fix a test that is currently failing than it is to start writing new tests where there are.
Got it. And is that the same kind of barrier as we're facing with unit tests? Is that people don't know how to put those together type of thing?
In my, at least I
added a unit test for the Weaver. I mean,
yeah, but there was the longest time where there wasn't, and I know Michelle helped a bit in setting that up. And so I feel like,
and I don't think it's automated. I don't think it's like automatically run. Is it?
Yeah, it is
on GitHub.
Yeah,
awesome.
And I don't remember, like I know I'm not remembering like who or when that got added, but I know it is. Cool. But honestly, like, yeah, once you have the file there, this is what the test looks like. And like, you can just sort of add another test that looks pretty similar, but does your thing instead. That's a lot easier to do than when there's nothing else. And honestly, and I feel like if I would also be fine with jumping into it if it was like a student ready, like I know you're still working on some like setting up secrets for
it's actually, that part's done as soon as it gets pulled in.
Nice, so. Okay. Yeah, but honestly, I feel like once that's in, you could just point us to like, or one of us to like run this interview, and then we'll have an action that runs on this, like on this repo. But it's at least for like in the past month, like few weeks or so, I feel it just hasn't quite been there yet. And
sure. Fair enough.
Okay, so I think we have an outline for what we're going to try to do. So
Lily, did you want to say something?
Sorry.
Yeah, but Quentin, I'll let you finish.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I know we're going over, but I'm glad we're able to try to finish this. But just to sum it up, like we're going to add 3 YAML files: test AL document, test AL general, test AL courts. Maybe let's just keep the manual playgroundy kind of file the same name for now. If it's not going to be an automated test, it could be confusing. It's not.
Could we just call it test AL document.yaml, because that's what the .feature file will be running.
I think what we've decided is that we still want to have a playgroundy kind of file of people to be able to try out new features.
It's less of a test and more of a.
Are we saying that we don't? I don't mind if we don't. I don't want to delete AL question test.yaml. That's not what I'm proposing. If that is the concern.
No, sorry. I feel like I'm understanding the issue. There's the current thing that's there is called test, but we're not really using it as an actual test that people go through and check every part to make sure it works. We're using it more as a development. Here's sandbox. Where you can like development sandbox. So maybe sandbox is a better name.
Could rename it. Yeah, I'm a little worried about renaming it test. That's all.
Yeah.
But we want to add just for AL document, AL general, and AL courts.
Right. Sure.
I'm just trying to say, we're going to add these 3 new YAML files. I'm fine with us renaming the other one. And we're going to add a .feature file or whatever for each of those 3 files too. We'll have multiple scenarios, and we're going to set it up so those run automatically. I think we could all start to look at that and understand it. It'll probably be really helpful for understanding your testing framework. If you set that up, are you able to work on that initial setup, Michelle, of adding those? I think we're talking about 6 new files plus whatever is needed for the GitHub action.
I think so, though. I think I'd start with 2 new files.
No,
But
they're going to be 3 new files because there's going to be a new test for AL document, a new test.
I'm saying I might start with just test AL document and just try that out iteratively, right? Like iterate on hopefully something that starts as a success. So yeah, I think even without admin access to the repository, I should still be able to set up the repository secrets, which is weird, but like we can go over that story some other day. But I think we'll want to go with you know what, I'll do that for now. And then when we set up organization secrets, we could just get rid of the other secrets. That's fine. Yeah, I can set it up.
Okay, I'm fine with setting it up the way you want to set it up.
If I can't set it up, then I will ask you to, and the interview should be fairly straightforward, and I can be there for it, and it should not take more than 10 minutes with the stuff we already know, because we know GitHub. If you didn't know GitHub, it might take longer, but take 5 to 10 minutes.
So I just want to understand, your ideal would be setting up, you would require admin access to Suffolk Lit Lab organization.
I don't think I need it.
Okay. So that I can't give you anyway. So I just wanted to make sure I understood. But I could give you permissions, admin permissions on the assembly line repo if you don't have those yet, when you need those. Would that be helpful to do it the right way?
Sure. To have them just so we can like not worry about it, that would be fine.
No.
Yeah, it's great. I love how GitHub handles this. I think it's in manage access. I think you might need to invite me personally. In which case I should get ready to.
Just a search issue. Okay, yeah, that's right. Just a weird UI thing. Okay, because you already had right access. That's fine. Okay, so you'll do the setup work. Maybe we can do a little training for how to do it, but maybe if it's a simple enough example, and I think we could probably all follow along. Just a suggestion here is to set these up so that there is a little menu at the beginning of each of these YAML files, and then each feature says which test to actually run. But so people could use it manually too, if they just want to test one thing. But maybe that's wrong. I don't know, just an idea. If I were adding a new feature that tested certain code, I might not want to wait till the GitHub action could run to figure out if I broke something. But
sure.
It's just an idea.
Yeah. I think for now, we'll add a menu when we find that it's needed, and until then, I think we just like it might just be a 1-page thing that you just go to, and you don't need a menu for a 1-page interview.
I guess it depends on what things the features are going to test. If it's like, did I break the whole interview when I changed this thing? It won't be able to give very helpful information about which scenario didn't run, right? If there's nothing that customized on the screen.
So the framework that I have cannot currently run in the playground or in the server with a live human person. So there isn't a way to press run the automated tests and run those same automated tests that GitHub would be automating.
But we're running an interview YAML file, right? So if I ran it and wanted to check, hey, I know I changed this line of code, this test should still pass. Could I click save and run and see that it worked by visual inspection or just by not getting an error? I'm just curious if that's something to keep in mind, that use case at all.
I
I'm
mean,
also
I
thinking
think
about
so.
how do we make the scenarios give granular results if there's just one page and it tests everything for that.
Well,
high
you
five.
can write a scenario that tries to download one document and see if that document, or see if that link has the correct text that has a docx, for example. And then you can have another scenario that tests whether another link has a docx or .pdf or whatever.
So it would test very specific kinds of regressions, but not all of them, it sounds like.
Not all of them at the same time. I
If
mean,
they're
you
on one-
can test all of them at the same time if you want, but if you want to be granular, then you can be.
Let's say that I added new code that just broke one function. If I test all of the functions on one screen and the change happened to
That's true. It would not.
be able to run,
It would not catch it. That's fair. That's fair.
It would only be like the output's different from what I expected. It wouldn't be like, yeah. Anyways, just an
Yeah.
idea. I
Yep.
have not written a lot of these tests, so you might have different ideas that are more informed.
All right.
Okay.
So can I make a comment?
Yes, sorry, Lily. This is all just a summary. You had another thing you wanted to add. Go ahead.
That's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to say that I remember the first time I talked to Michelle about this testing. Comparing to today, I really want to applaud to what you have done and what you have accomplished. It's a lot of work, a lot of dedication. So,
Thank you.
but now I do have two thoughts. One is that I know nothing about testing framework, so I would love to see something like on a documentation website. Maybe you could create a few pages and give the overview how it works, and then have a page and say this is what I have accomplished, and maybe I'll have another page and say this is what is under construction, and things like that. In that case, because
So
we
I have,
been going through a few discussions on these calls, but each time I feel you are repeating a lot of things. But for me, I'm still not quite getting them, and sometimes I forget things. And then when you say, "Oh, I remember it," but if you have something on the documentation web page, we can go back there and read it, and finally get understand it, right?
so yeah, there is one that is not accessible to the sidebar right now, because I was waiting till, I don't know, some kind of go ahead. I was gonna bring that up on Tactical Tuesday now. So, but I can give you the link to it, which is available. Hang on, because you can go to a link that exists in the folder, even if
It's not on the
let me see.
sidebar.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to go ahead on Tactical Tuesday
Okay.
to add a documentation page.
So
Okay.
Do you want to just say it? We can show it here on screen too. If you find it, I can add it to the.
yeah.
So why
Okay,
is
here
it
we
not
go.
published? Is there-
Because I wasn't sure like when I should go ahead and do that, whether we wanted to have published tests or whether like when was the appropriate time. I put it in the chat, but I can put it in.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see the chat.
Sure, no
Integrated.
worries. I
I
can
mean,
also,
I feel you can publish it because if anything that's not final, just either note and say this is not final, this is on the in the
That's
program,
fair.
whatever. That way,
fair.
at
This
least
is-
you get exposed to it.
Yeah. So this is a bit rough, but it's got a lot of the sentences that you can use and some of the basics of how to use things. It doesn't have this is how you get started, right? I mean, you can copy and paste. It says, go to your sources folder, name a file, and put this stuff in it. But I think there's more to be done before people will actually, just be able to use this documentation to understand everything. I think Bryce would agree. He's gone over this documentation before. And a lot of questions that y'all brought up that I wouldn't have known to expect. So it's good. to know these things. And I've been trying to write some of them down, but I did not get most of them. So,
I mean, I don't know, maybe it was wrong, but I just decided this is live already. So you should be able to go right to the video. It's already public.
all right, there you go.
I don't know if it will go on the playlist.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, you can add a note on the top and say whatever you want to say. So give people warning, just in case you want to make sure that nobody complains. You can just do whatever.
I figured like we've had to redact stuff before, but also nobody is looking at our streaming live. So I could.
Okay. So
Anyway.
that's one thought. So the other thought that I'm having that I know you just started this new thing about this YAM file, the feature file, but once it's working, we can potentially add to the Weaver download package so that people have a template to start with, and then they can just
Sure.
customize it.
That's a
That
great
way
idea.
you get people involved much easier because they don't have to start from scratch.
Okay. Yeah, that
That's
would be.
something down the road, but just,
If it can also add other files to the package, then once we have an organization secret, honestly, we can, that would be a bit of maintenance, but we could figure out if we can, just add the files that the tests need to run so that it's just running to begin with.
right.
All right. Well, I think we have some action items, everybody. So let's see. I think that's probably a good place for us to stop, unless there's any other follow-up questions people had so they knew what to do next.
I'm all set.
Okay. All right. So the only other thing I'm going to remind people is triage issues. There's no reason we have to wait till the second to do that. So start thinking about that, or also additional focuses, although we probably have enough of a focus for a 3-week sprint. But maybe something new that you have will take priority of what we've identified.
Sure.
All right. Well, I will see you all later,
All right.
everybody.
Bye.